how do rich people manage their money, right? Because you run this company, and your company takes an investment of at least 2.5 crore. So people having,
Yeah.
less money than that cannot even participate or invest through your company. So you deal with a lot of rich people. I just wanted to understand how they think
Right.
about money, how they think about investments.
Right. So I think the first discussion that we have with anyone is on how do you want to allocate, how should you allocate your assets, right? Clearly, if somebody is in a build-up phase, in the sense that young professional in their 40s and looking to invest their money for goals which are much later in life, then you are more allocated towards equities. And within equities, depending on the size of your portfolio, you would have funds or AIFs or stocks or PMS, right? And you'll have some debt and some gold. But if I move towards ultra rich, let's say ultra rich in India is defined as somebody who has a portfolio of 25 crore plus. But then again, you have a lot of ultra rich families who are, let's say, in excess of 100 crores, right? So the larger the portfolio, the way it changes is the objective moves more towards preservation of capital, right? So typically people would have a balanced portfolio or would have a slightly conservative portfolio. So typically equity would be 30 to 50% and rest will be debt and gold and certain other alternatives. Uh, as the size of the portfolio increases, the share of alternates in the portfolio increases, because then you're able to do things like structured debt, you're able to do things like private equity, you're able to do things like co-investing, you're able to do certain international investing. It's all a function of corpus, because the minimum ticket size for some of these alternative funds is 5 crores. So hence, if you have a 10 crore portfolio, then you're more restricted to the traditional avenues like a mutual funds, PMS or an AIF. The moment, or you can buy some bonds. The moment your corpus becomes in excess of 25 crores, move towards 100 crores, then you can actually build a meaningful portfolio of alternates, right? So that is how the color changes. But generally, the bigger the corpus, the entire objective becomes more preservation.
Ashish, I was just wondering, nowadays in the current scenario, there are two kinds of rich that are coming up, right?
Yes.
Not just two kinds of, but I have two kinds of people in mind.
Yes.
The ones who have built a huge startup, who is making money through listing their company. They're relatively young people and have a lot of money. How do they manage their own money? How do they want to manage
Yeah.
their money compared to people who are in a salary job or who have been having huge amount of money from generations?
Yeah, so that's a very, very interesting and a good question, Sachin. Basically, what we've seen is that if I may call it generational wealth, right? That wealth is a little more conservative and more tilted towards preservation and traditional asset classes like debt, equity, gold, alternates, so on and so forth. But a lot of the people who are now creating wealth because of their own startups, right, are actually investing back in that ecosystem, because they somewhere have the feeling that hey, this is the ecosystem which has contributed to me and I want to contribute back to the ecosystem. Plus, there is the belief, because you've seen wealth getting created for yourself, that this ecosystem will also enable me to create a lot of wealth into the future, right? So they may keep some money aside, some liquidity aside, which will go into traditional things like mutual funds, etc., so that they have some liquidity. But they are more than happy to take risk and invest it back in startups. So you see a lot of these entrepreneurs typically in cities which have a startup ecosystem, like, to give you an example, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, Gurgaon, or for example in Mumbai, something like a Powai would be an equivalent of Gurgaon, right? So yes, you see a very different risk appetite.
So, Ashish, for your own personal portfolio, how do you balance this? There is one side of the equation where people invest in, private shares, which
Yeah.
have a lot of room to grow, where you're taking a lot of risk. Whereas in the other extreme, and people are very conservative. Obviously, you don't have any that portfolio, but do you have any allocation in startup
No,
kind
so
of
last
companies?
year I have invested in a couple of unlisted companies. I mean, actually, one very negligent, but one unlisted company, because I feel that this is a company which is in the right industry with a large runway of growth. And our funds have also invested. So there was a co-invest available. So that's how I could decide to allocate there.
And can you share us little bit about this company? What does this company do, and why are you,
So I think what is happening, Sachin, is that because a lot of private equity money is flowing into India, either through domestic funds or global funds, many companies which are in very exciting sectors are choosing to remain private for longer, because that allows them the flexibility to invest and grow faster. So to give you an example, sectors like internet consumer sectors or any digital platforms, right? We have a few listed players. I mean, for example, the biggest in terms of market cap is Zomato, right? Now, Zomato was unlisted for a very long period, and these are all new age sectors with long runway for growth. So if you have to invest in these kind of sectors early, then if you you do get an opportunity in the unlisted space.
Ashay, I want to end this interview by asking you this very interesting question.
Right.
So we were talking backstage, and you happened to mention that you also manage, help your parents manage their portfolio.
That's right.
But you have invested 100% of their money in
Right.
equities.
Right.
Generally, older people, they tend to stay away from equities, right?
Yeah.
So what is the logic behind that, and how is it going on?
Logic is simple. Look, I guide them and they decide. But we had this very interesting conversation 8, 9 years back, and they were asking me how should we manage our finances. I said, look, I'm a big believer in equities, and I do believe, even because they had a corpus that would allow them to do that. I said, even you should be fully in equities, because equities compound at 10, 15%. Yes, if there is any volatility in between, it was my parents, so I could tell them, look, I'll cover the shortfall, right? So that safety net they had. But I think we did it 8, 9 years back. We broke all the fixed deposit and put it in equities, and it's done extremely well for them. So the portfolio in the last, I think, 8, 9 years would be up anywhere between 5 to 6 times, which in FDs, I mean, you would have been happy if it had barely doubled, right? So they have a much bigger corpus, and they like to invest in stocks. So now the dividend income itself is taking care of their expenses. So really, the volatility in the market doesn't impact them. So I do believe beyond a certain threshold of a corpus, you can do that, but they probably got that conviction because of me as well. I wouldn't advise this to everyone. But just one thought I wanted to leave, because there is a lot of traditional thinking on asset allocation. I do believe after a certain corpus and after a certain age, you can become very aggressive, because most people cannot consume their savings. So actually, you're leaving the portfolio behind for the next generation. Then your time horizon is actually much longer than you think.